Direct from Kansas City, it's Comic Book Late Night with Captain Logan. Featuring brand new comic book reviews, thoughts on comic news, obscure character of the week, and a little something from the comic vault. And now, here's Captain Logan.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Comic Book Late Night. I am indeed Captain Logan. So, this week, something I have devoted a year of my life to finally ended. A little book DC has been putting out called Brightest Day. And Brightest Day number 24 finally came out at a $4.99 price tag because it's a little bit thicker, and fair enough, you get some more pages, and so it's a little more expensive. But through its whole run, it's been $2.99 an issue up until the final issue. Now, of course, it's been a semi-monthly series, so if it came out like a normal comic book, I actually would have devoted 2 years of my life to this, and I certainly have devoted 2 years of money, of income to this. So $2.99 an issue, and I was thinking about this, now that it's done, I got 2 spots left in my pull list. I'm saving $6 a month now that I'm done with this, and I was thinking, what could I do with $6? These days, just how far does $6 really go? And I was thinking, well, I could get 2 more DC books on my pull, and they've drawn their line at $2.99, so I could pretty safely say that at least for a good long while, I could get 2 DC books, pretty much any title I wanted to, and it would be very rare, like in an instance like this, or with like Action Comics 900, where it's 96 pages, so it's $6, where they bump the price up on you, but only because you get so many more pages. I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking I could do that, or I could get 2 Marvel titles nobody's been reading, because Marvel, of course, draws their line, just in their comics. They draw lines in their comics, not really with price points. And so, I could be pretty sure that I could get 2 books that nobody really cares about for $2.99. And then I'm thinking, what else could I do though? If I didn't want to get comics, what else could I do? Well, $6 would get me enough gas to get to like the end of the block, so I could do that. Or it would get me almost the movie ticket, like if I took my $6, maybe a matinee, maybe, or if I just scrounged through like my couch cushions for some change, maybe I could manage a movie. It would get me just over half of a monthly subscription to Netflix. So I'd have to come up with some more money if I wasn't already doing that. What else would it give me? Let's see. It would get me like a 3.5-inch action figure, or half of a 6-inch action figure. It's kind of interesting how that works actually. I guess you're paying $2 per inch of action figure. And then I actually never thought about that before. That's really amusing. Okay, and then I could get like 2 meals at McDonald's, or almost a meal at Burger King. That would do it. But I tell you what. I just thought of this. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take 3 of those dollars and kind of put them aside and save it. I'm gonna put that in savings. Maybe I'll buy like 2 sodas with it or something. Okay, but the $3 or $4, depending on what it is, I'm going to buy a new comic. I'm going to put one more comic book on my pull list, and you guys are going to help me decide what it is. That's right, and I'm not joking. This is what I want you to do. In the comments, leave up to 3 ideas of books I can put on my list, on my pull list, that I'm not currently reviewing. And I'm trying to spread my wings a little bit. So I'm reading plenty of DC, and I'm reading quite a bit of Marvel right now. So what I want you to do is make it either an indie comic, either a title that's an indie publisher, or an imprint. So it could be Marvel or DC, but not mainline regular Marvel or DC universe stuff. And it doesn't have to be superhero. I'm really spreading out a little bit, trying to review some other things. I've just started reviewing some indie comics. Won't be any this week. I've got 7 Marvel and DC. Tons of stuff came out this week. But I am starting to review some other things. So whatever gets the most votes, and that's why I want you to put up to 3. Whatever book gets the most votes, I'm going to put that on my pull list, and I'm going to at least try it out and review the 1 issue of it. And then if I hate it, I'll try something else. But I'm gonna do that. Leave that in the comments, and let's see how it goes. I want to hear from everybody. I want some ideas and suggestions from everybody reading comics who watches Comic Book Late Night. So do that for me. It'll be really fun. I got a fantastic show for you tonight. Tonight I'm going to be interviewing Rick Dakan. I'm really excited about it. Rick Dakan is the author of the fabulous Geek Mafia series. It's a book series about a guy who ends up working with a geek mafia. They like swindle people out of their money, and they're usually like geeky kinds of fields, like game developers and things like that. It's highly entertaining. It's also very realistic. It's a really great series. And Rick Dakan also happens to be the guy who co-created the City of Heroes, the MMO. So anyway, gonna talk to him later. That's gonna be really cool. And I got some news. I got what may potentially be the biggest comic book news this year. I don't think anybody else has this. Like, I don't think anybody else has even heard about this yet. I figured this out on my own. I'm really excited about it. I'm gonna this is Comic Book Late Night first. We got it first. So stay tuned for that. Possibly the biggest thing you're gonna find out about all year long in comics. But right now it's time for seven comic book reviews, rapid fire comic reviews. Here we go right now. Okay, let's kick it right off with Brightest Day number 24, and I'm going to make these as rapid fire as possible, but I've got two really big issues, Brightest Day and Action Comics this week. So a lot to say, but we'll go as quick as we can. Brightest Day number 24, here it is. Once again, I'm a little disappointed with the end of this, just because it's nothing like what I thought it would be. Now, I don't want to sound hypocritical. I've been praising this series for being unpredictable, but while it's remained that, I don't know if I personally was really satisfied with it. I read 24 issues to get to the big final reveal that the savior of the world is Swamp Thing, but I can't say I hate it either. What's done with it is actually pretty clever. The idea that because of how Swamp Thing works, it actually thinks it's Necron, just like it thought it was Alec Holland, and so the real Alec Holland has to be brought to life and turn into Swamp Thing for the very first time to battle it. The whole thing feels pretty epic, and while this all came out of left field for me, partially because I've never read Swamp Thing and didn't really get what all the fuss was about, I really need to do that. Even I couldn't help but be at least a little in awe of the two-page spread of Swamp Thing wearing the White Lantern emblem on his chest. I also appreciate that there really are some sacrifices made. Not as many as I might have liked, but at least by the end, not everyone is left alive. And I won't give away whom, but it's pretty sad. I need to give this series another read, straight through now that it's over, before I can really make an impartial decision on whether it's ultimately a satisfying narrative. My gut reaction is that it feels too much like a 24-issue setup to some new status quo for DC. But that's not really fair either, because there's also a lot of good character stuff for Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Firestorm, and others throughout the series. And with Swamp Thing going after big oil tycoons and such, there's an environmental message capping this off that, in my opinion, is a little heavy-handed. But all in all, this is a really emotional issue, and when bad things happen to characters in this series, especially Deadman, I cared about them. And moving on now to Action Comics number 900, this behemoth of an issue of Action Comics. I don't want to give anything away about this issue. It's a huge milestone and it's treated like one. The lead story is fantastic. Not everyone's going to love it because it's so tied to Doomsday and the death of Superman, and while the reign of the Doomsday stuff in the Superman-Batman annual was mostly just a giant slugfest, there's a mystery with Doomsday being solved here that's intriguing, bizarre, but potentially a little hokey all at the same time. I don't know if it's going to be resolved ultimately in a satisfying way, but I love what's here with the four Supermen from Reign of the Superman along with Supergirl trying to figure out how Doomsday has been gaining their powers and what Lex's involvement is. I'm especially impressed with how effortlessly the Reign of Doomsday and Black Ring stories converge here, and how Cornell organizes it so that it's pretty easy to follow if you've been reading one of those arcs but not the other. Now, do take that with a grain of salt, as I personally have followed all the Black Ring stuff, and I've skipped around with the Doomsday stuff. At any rate, even if you don't care about the Doomsday story, what's done with Lex and Superman here is simply breathtaking. They're each forced to take a good, hard look at each other, and it's not just a massive fight, regardless of how powerful Lex has become. Lex has the power to make Superman relive his most painful moments, and he uses this to try to convince Superman that he's not human and doesn't have human emotions. Among the scenes he forces Superman to live again is the destruction of New Krypton, and it's great to finally see him grieve about this. I didn't love how Lex got that power last issue, but the character stuff we get between him and Superman is really in character and really epic. Like I said, I don't want to give anything else away. If you've got an extra $6 this month and you're a fan of Superman at all, I highly recommend this issue if you buy nothing else this month. In the back, there are also several short stories by big heavy hitters, including Paul Dini, David Goyer, and Damon Lindelof. I like Lindelof's story a lot. It's about Jor-El just before the destruction of Krypton, but the others I could kind of take or leave. Richard Donner's was a little disappointing just because DC's ads for this book have been putting his name close to the top of the list of writers working on this book, and of course, his story is a screenplay with a storyboard rather than a comic story. Still, it is neat that it's here. Okay, let's move on now to Flash number 11. We're almost to Flashpoint, and in this issue, Hot Pursuit reveals what the time anomaly is. Just like with Brightest Day, Jeff Johns is really good at not showing his hand, and I didn't see this coming at all. Barry's family calls an intervention, trying to get him to look at his priorities, and I think they're being a little insensitive considering he's in the middle of a bizarre supernatural murder case. At any rate, we get a quick history of all the Flashes and Barry's relationship with each of them. Bart's is the most strained, and it's a pretty emotional moment when Barry tries to explain why he hasn't had time for him, and Bart tells him not to waste any time on him, saying, "You haven't wasted any time on me yet." This is both ironic and sad, considering that what Barry's dealing with right now is all about time travel. There's a different artist this issue, Scott Collins, who I'm really digging, especially how he draws the various Flashes from their respective times. He's putting a lot of dynamic energy into each panel. Solid issue with really important and interesting developments, and the last page made me gasp. Okay, my favorite series right now from DC, Detective Comics, number 876. So Jock's back this issue with his beautifully stunning artwork, and Steiner brings us another thrilling first part of what's bound to be as satisfying an arc as his last two have been. I'm coming to expect nothing short of excellence every issue on this series. Once again, Steiner shocks, entertains, and challenges his readers all in a single issue. It opens with a bizarre and unexpected mystery. Someone has killed a killer whale and left it at the front of one of Gotham's biggest and newest banks. I gotta say, I was really surprised when I popped this open and that's what I saw. Dick and Gordon work on this mystery together, and they discover the dead body of the bank's owner's secretary inside the whale. And things get really interesting when we discover the bank owner is none other than the daughter of Tony Zuko, the man who murdered Dick's parents. Snyder is doing a great job of weaving elements of each of his arcs together to keep things realistic and unpredictable. The issue of Gordon's son's possible insanity still looms in the background, as Gordon asks Dick to fill James out for him. Dick is placed in a truly horrifying predicament at the end of the book, and this is probably the hardest one for me to wait month to month for. And last but certainly not least from DC this week, we've got Batman Incorporated number 5. The plot thickens, answers are revealed, and new questions arise. This is quickly moving away from a formula of Batman going somewhere to recruit a hero for Batman Inc. to the mystery of why Batman needs a world full of Batmen to unravel. It's complicated and engrossing, and I have a lot of respect for a series where I have to reread every issue twice to catch everything. It isn't that Morrison's writing is confusing and not straightforward enough, necessarily, as I used to think it was when I foolishly tried to jump into the middle of RIP, but every issue is so thickly plotted and there's so much to remember. It's kind of like Lost, and you're really getting your money's worth. I may go back and reread the first 5 issues again before 6, just to make sure I have everything straight. Batman, El Gaucho, the Hood, and Batwoman are gathered to a secret lair where they think Dr. Daedalus is hiding. He's supposedly extremely old and has been working on a superweapon since the Nazi era, something that would replace most modern forms of energy. Naturally, of course, things aren't what they seem, and without spoiling anything, I'll just say that there's a global threat looming and Batman Inc. is starting to make a little more sense. I'm loving all this mystery and intrigue. There's something really 007 about the story. And I love Batwoman's sense of humor. When the Hood sneaks up on her, she says she has some missile defense system targeting a spinal column, and later tells him she just made that up. This is Yannick Paquette's last issue, and I'm sad to see him go. Besides his always realistic architecture and landscapes, there's some fantastic action in this one, especially the 2-page fight and nearly a dozen panels between Scorpiana and Batwoman. Dynamite stuff. And now let's go ahead and jump over to Marvel and look at FF number 2. As apprehensive as I've been about this new series, and as mercilessly as I've ragged on these new costumes, I have to say I was ready to drop FF until this issue. I really enjoyed this. Dr. Doom is apparently about to become part of the team, and there's naturally dissension in their ranks. Reed seems to think they need him, though I'm not entirely clear on why. At any rate, he's got some brain damage, which is keeping him from tapping into his full intellect and from using the dark arts. So he and Reed go to Latveria to use his adopted son Kristoff's mind, which Doom implanted all of his memories into when he decided to make Kristoff his heir. I'm finding this Doom mythos fascinating. Now, to be fair, I haven't read any of this before in comics, so I'm probably fascinated while others are bored from exposition they've heard before. And Sue and Ben's anger is totally understandable. I felt for them. They just lost Johnny, and now they have to deal with Doom, who, in full diabolical Doom style, feels the need to try to make Ben feel guilty about Johnny's death by asking him if it's true that he just stood back and watched when Johnny died. Again, we've got another awesome reveal at the end that I can't spoil, but I will say that Doom, of course, has a plan, and it's unexpected, twisted, and finding out about it is the best part of the issue. After the initial buzz about changing the team to the Future Foundation in the first issue, Hickman's already doing a fantastic job of bringing this book back to what it was before. It feels like Fantastic Four. It's about this family, not just about some new team headed by them. Spider-Man is already feeling like he's in the background, though I hope his being around is made a little more relevant soon, and that he's not just here to sell books like he has been in a lot of other places lately. Okay, and finally for Marvel, Venom #2. So yay, the first issue wasn't a fluke. Remender really knows what he's doing with this title. This one's as gripping and engaging as the last. We've got a good external conflict with Venom versus Kraven the Hunter, who found Venom while he was on a mission and of course has to try to hunt him. The time bomb idea is being used to its full effect as Flash is forced to stay merged with the symbiote just past the 48-hour mark. And by the way, this is actually a real time bomb. Apparently, if his boss decides he's been merged with Venom too long, there's a trigger that can be activated and he'll explode. There's also a great internal conflict, and Flash is being made even more real and more well-rounded as we see his girlfriend, Betty Brant, wondering why he's never around, and Flash thinks about her, determined to stay alive because he doesn't want to die a liar, because of course he's not there for her and he can't tell her what he's really doing. One of the best parts about the series is seeing Flash's altered thoughts when the symbiote starts to take over. At the end, his narration starts to sound like he's embracing the idea of being merged with it, and it comes off as creepy. Still not crazy about the art, but the story is solid, and I'm still finding myself totally behind this idea of Venom as a full-fledged superhero. Well, that's it for new comic reviews, and now let's go straight on to the news. So there's a brand new X-Men First Class trailer out this week, and if you haven't seen it yet, don't be deceived when you watch it that it starts off exactly the same way that the other trailer did, because there actually is a lot more footage in it. We're getting a little bit more sense of what the plot's going to be. There's some more banter with Professor X and Magneto. We get to see there's this really neat big spread of the main X-Men wearing their yellow costumes that we didn't see before and stuff like that. And man, every time I see more on this thing, it just looks better and better. It looks so competent, and it just looks like it really knows what it's doing. I think it has the chance. I don't know. You can't tell a lot from trailers. If nothing else, they're sure advertising it right, because even without a lot of the characters that I would have liked to have seen in this thing, I mean, it looks like it has a shot at being, the best or one of the best X-Men movies. And man, I hope I don't eat my words on that, but it looks amazing. So anyway, do be sure and watch that if you haven't. Brian Fuller is finally putting out a Pushing Daisies comic. I only wanted to mention this because I actually like that show. I'm not a huge fan. I haven't actually finished watching it yet, but I've watched the first season, and I really liked it, and it seems like something that could be pretty cool in a comic book form. Apparently, he announced this back when the show got canceled, and it was supposed to be in DC's Wildstorm imprint, and of course, Wildstorm is defunct now, but they're still going to do it, and I guess it's still going to be DC's. So that's supposed to come out here this, I guess maybe at the end of the year. It's supposed to kind of tie up some of the loose ends since the series got canceled. So if you're a fan of that show, if you like that show, I know some of our viewers do. So be sure to check that comic when it comes out. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is we got upcoming movies, just in case you don't know what the timetable is, upcoming movies. So, of course, Thor comes out next Friday, and I will do my very best to review it on the show next week. If I can go to the Thursday night showing, I will. Otherwise, I'll review it the week after. And this week, Dylan Dog Dead at Night comes out, and it's based on an Italian horror comic, kind of a supernatural thing. I've not read it. I hadn't even heard about it until the movie came out, but it is starring Brandon Routh, and I've been seeing some advertising, and I wasn't really interested in it until, of course, I found out it was based on a comic book. When I saw the first trailers, it just didn't seem that engaging, because it looks like a giant, a CG action fluff piece to me. But maybe it won't be. Maybe that's just how it's being advertised. And I do like Brandon Routh quite a bit, so I'm going to try to go see it if I get a chance, and I will talk about it on the show. Those are the little things, and now I wanted to save the best piece of news for last. This is huge, guys. This has the chance of changing the face of comics as we know them, and okay, you know what? Without further ado, here it is. So I have it on really good authority that
Hello, my minions. I am Dooms Vince, and I've come to bring you a message of destruction. A message of destruction for Captain Logan, because I'm not fond of him. The reason for this unfortunate delay between my videos is that Captain Logan has increased his security. His code is stronger. His firewall is greater. Have you ever tried to break through a firewall with a hammer? It burns. But at last I can finally fulfill my promise to you, my viewers, my doomsayers, about the benefits of being a doomsayer. I know that you have waited with bated breath. I promise you a machine that can steal everyone's right foot. Once a month you will have superpowers, but only on days that end in 5. When the apocalypse comes, I promise that you will be the last ones to die. And when I kill Apocalypse, I promise that you will be the first ones in line to have popcorn for the show. You'll be pleased to know that the dress code for being a doomsayer is very relaxed. You can wear anything underneath your dark hooded robe. All of my doomsayers will be awarded a will, and that will stipulate that all of your worldly possessions will come to me in the event of your untimely death. Your worldly possessions even include your livestock. In the event that you live, I have half of your women. But on the plus side, Friday night is taco night. And of course, last but not least, you can fully expect the destruction of Captain Logan and all of his viewers, minus you. But most importantly, my minions, my doomsayers, it is not just your rewards that you have come to hear from me tonight. You are also waiting your challenge. My challenge to you, my doomsayers, is to go out into a public venue using chalk to write on a sidewalk, write Geekvolution on YouTube, so that people can come see the impending doom of Captain Logan. Now, my minions, go out into the world and fulfill your devious plans and make your Dooms Vince a happy Dooms Vince.
So this is going to change comics as we know it. I can't express in words how I feel about this. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. This is amazing. Anyway, let's go on to a trivia question, shall we? And today's trivia question is, in the early 70s, Marvel premiered a new female character who is sometimes referred to as the Huntress. Now, this is Marvel, not DC. There's a character who's sometimes referred to as the Huntress, but she's better known as what name? Leave your answer in the comments. Tell me what you think, and whoever gets it right first, I will, of course, mention in next week's episode. Last week's question was, what was the year that Ninja Turtles premiered in the comics? The correct answer there was 1984. Was the first issue of Mirage Studios' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that was correctly answered by 27 Studios. So well done to you. And now it's time for another exciting edition of Know Your Batmobiles. Hey, here's a Batmobile. What year do you think it's from? Is it from 1983, 1990, or 2010? And I'll come back at the end of the show to tell you what the year is. Tonight, my very special guest is Rick Dakan, author of the fantastic Geek Mafia book series and co-creator of the very successful game City of Heroes. Please welcome him to the program, and let's take a listen. Okay, I'm here with Rick Dakan. Hi, Rick.
Hey, how's it going, James?
I'm good. Rick has written numerous role-playing books. He helped start Cryptic Studios and the online role-playing sensation City of Heroes. He wrote a 12-issue series of City of Heroes comic books, and he's currently a prolific novelist. The way I found out about him is I read his first installment in the Geek Mafia series, which is about a comic book artist who joins a band of con artists to swindle people, especially those in the geekiest of industries, out of their money. Rick, before we get started and go through the very ominous comic grill, why don't you tell us a little bit about your new book, Rage Quit?
Rage Quit is a novel that's being serialized on the Moving Pixels blog at popmatters.com. And it represents sort of a return slightly to the original Geek Mafia in that it's set at a video game company. It's even set at the same video game company. But this is a very different kind of story. It's sort of I call it a fable for the gaming age. It's about a video game tester named Randall whose main test character gets tired of dying over and over again, and so she sort of breaks out of the game and goes her own way, and much chaos ensues. And so that's free every week at popmatters.com on Thursdays usually.
And then are you gonna have it are you gonna sell it eventually?
Yeah, eventually there'll be some form of compiled together. I'm juggling around a couple different options there. I want to maybe try some other experimental things with it, so we'll see.
And that one's slightly different from what you usually do, right? In that it's like slightly supernatural.
Yeah, I mean it's got that one sci-fi element. I mean of sort of this. Yeah, it's really probably almost more of a fantasy element. I mean there's internal logic to why it's happening within the story, but yeah, most of my other books don't really tend to have any fantastical elements in them, so. Which is kind of strange, given that I love that kind of stuff.
yeah, exactly. Considering your background, I think that's amazing that you generally work within realistic stuff. But I mean, Geek Mafia is extremely realistic, despite despite how absurd it is all at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with that one, which has a lot of that whole series has a lot of hacking stuff, and I went out of my way. To make sure all the technology was as close to real as sort of my layman mind could grasp. I think they get more and more so. The first one I did a fair amount of research for. By the third, a lot of the third Geek Mafia book is based on my own experiences at HackerCons, and I had, professional computer security people read it, and
oh wow, that's cool.
So yeah, I tried, because that stuff's fascinating, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on, really, so that you can just.
Well, and when I was reading, and I haven't read the other two yet, but when I was reading the first one, I kept finding myself going, "Wow, I hope this guy hasn't actually tried any of this stuff," because a lot of the plans that they have seem like things that could actually get pulled off, and I was like, "Wow, this is kind of scary. I hope no one reads this and tries this."
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things, right? You're like, are you going to inspire someone to a life of crime? But they are fiction. My father's a judge, actually, and
oh wow, cool.
And one of his favorite sayings is that for criminals, getting caught is never part of the plan, which is his way of saying criminals just often just think if they come up with a plan and execute it, and it'll all work out according to plan, and it just usually doesn't. So, but because it's fiction, I can have it work out. I think probably much more often than it would in the real world.
Are you ready to go into the ever ominous comic grill?
I'm. I have a little bit of trepidation, but I'm ready. I got a bottle of scotch here. I've got a knife. Okay.
Awesome. Do you bring those objects to every interview?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Cool. Awesome. We need to up our security here at Geekvolution. question number one. So, as I mentioned earlier, of course, you helped design the super successful City of Heroes video game and then were promptly fired by your partners, if I understand it right. Your history seems to me like kind of a Phoenix metaphor, right? Like, you're part of this company that has huge potential, and then you're dropped from it, and then you come back and, persevere with this prolific writing career. My question is, how autobiographical is Paul's background in Geek Mafia to your own background?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously clearly is autobiographical in a lot of ways. I mean, I started writing that book, as a kind of catharsis from that experience. So while there are big important differences, I mean, I technically stepped down from my position at Cryptic Studios, in a sort of need to step down now, so you should write a letter way. But I actually kept working on the game for another 18 months as a contractor, which was sort of a weird situation. Whereas Paul is, totally cut loose. But certainly the emotions and and there are a lot of like little small details from those early scenes in the book that are like straight out of, like, especially in chapter 3, the scene where he sort of gets the news. There's a lot of moments from that are straight out of what actually happened to me, which made it, for me, I think, that was sort of why I was writing it in part. And then I think for the reader, I think hopefully that sense of the awkwardness of a real situation like that can come through, when you're sitting in the room there waiting for the rest of the people to show up, and, one of the people who's about to fire you is like making small talk about sports and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very real, and at the same time, it doesn't feel like you were too terribly close to it. Because sometimes, people will write things like that and it will feel, like they're just venting, and there's not, the characters aren't likable and there's not any story happening because they're just venting. And I didn't have that. I mean, like, if somebody, because I didn't, I mean, if somebody read that and didn't know your background, they would probably assume you just made it up, that it wasn't actually part of you. So, your realistic experience makes it work.
And part of that was, thank you, and part of that for me was also that I didn't, it's not like I felt, at the time I did, but even when I got to the point of writing the book, a year later or so, a year and a half later, I had reflected enough to realize I had made my fair share of bad mistakes. It wasn't like this totally unwarranted thing. Mm-hmm. And I really tried very hard to sort of see all the situation from everyone's eyes. I wanted to sort of give everybody, every point of view from that kind of situation a fair shake, and not, I wasn't writing it to get back at anyone, right? I was writing it because I thought it was a powerful, emotional moment that could be a good catalyst for a story.
All right, and do you still have a relationship with any of those guys?
I do, actually. Most of them have read the book. I'm still quite good friends with the person who was the CEO. I'm actually, he and his girlfriend and I just spent part of the summer in Berlin together, and they're going to be here in Florida tomorrow.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's all, even like the character who was the basis of Frank, or the inspiration for Frank, who sort of has a kind of villainous role in the novel, has read it and said lots of nice things and funny things about it. So
awesome. Question 2, who would you say is your all-time favorite and most inspirational comic book writer, since you have indeed written comic books?
I think it's sort of a tie for me, but that's cheating, but whatever. I've got this knife here, so... for me, it's a tie, and they're right next to each other on my shelf, which, being the total writer nerd I am, I alphabetize my comic book or my graphic novels by author. So instead of title or series or whatever. So Grant Morrison.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I've not heard of anybody ever doing that.
I think I'm the only person I've ever heard of who does it too, but that's sort of, what I follow in comics more than anything is the writers, not the characters. So I do organize my shelf by author. And they're right next to each other. It's Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. And they kind of each do amazing stuff, and they each do it in a pretty different way,
Mm-hmm. And they're both crazy.
And they're both crazy, so I love that. They're crazy in different ways. Like, Moore has a much more, like, controlled, precise, thoughtful crazy, and then Morrison is sort of the gonzo crazy, but he can do tight storytelling too, while being, having these, like, far out there ideas. And the stuff I love of theirs is, like, I've read some of Morrison's recent Batman stuff and things like that, but, the things I love of his are, like The Invisibles and, Doom Patrol and stuff like that, Flex Mentallo. And for more, I love his sort of more, like my two favorite more things are the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stuff and then From Hell. You know, that sort of playing with history and literature and Lost Girls, actually, I'm a big fan of that too.
Question number 3. One of the ingenious plots that I was talking about in your book is a plot to sell decoy high-graded comics on eBay. And that was my favorite part of the book. It's hilarious. And I was just wondering how you came up with that.
Well, it turns out that my little brother is actually a grader at CGC. And actually when he had just started there when I wrote that book, he's still there. And I think he might have even still been just like an intern, because he had been working in a comic book store and then sort of moved over. Because they are based here in Sarasota, Florida, where I live, just sort of randomly. So that gave me a little more insight, although I didn't really, it's not based on the actual necessary precise procedures that are at CGC, but, those guys read it after the fact.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah. But I always found that whole thing kind of fascinating, and in my head, it kind of did do that same run where, for a long time, I had thought that it would, back in the 90s when I had sort of went through a period where I was fascinated by wine and collecting wine. I never had the money to do it. but I would read about it. And, so I'd already had this thought about, like people collect wine that they just never drink, right? And these old, this old 1960s Chateau Latour or whatever that's worth, thousands of dollars, and when would you ever drink it? And
how could you be sure that that's what's in there?
How could you? Yeah, so I'd had that idea of like, well, it's somebody, and I'm sure I think I had read that, that had happened to people making, forgeries of collectible wines.
Wow.
And actually, Paul goes through that same process when he's trying to come up with an idea. He in the book he mentions the wine first, and then comes up with the comic thing, and that's basically exactly.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And that was sort of the same process that I'd gone through too when I was trying to come up. It actually pretty much happened like I wrote it in the book. I was like, well, Paul needs to come up with something, and then and then he's in comics, and then I looked at these. I've never had anything a CGC graded thing because I'm more of a reader than a collector, I mean, it makes sense for the people who do it, but for me, I just found that whole thing of you have to seal it away and never read it for it to be the value that you've paid for it to, be ascribed. I thought that's just fascinating and seems like it was ripe for some sort of con. So yeah, that's how that came up.
Rick, question number 4. I know you got your degree in creative writing, your master's degree, and I got a bachelor's in creative writing, and I was wondering if you would encourage other people to do the same who are aspiring to be writers.
Yeah, I have an MFA from the Rainier Writers Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, and I did it's a low residency MFA program where you only go sort of for summer residency for a couple weeks, and then the vast majority of the time is spent working one-on-one with a mentor, long distance sending stuff every month.
I envy you. That would have been cool.
And I really liked that, and I came to it as someone who'd written a bunch, as game writing and the comics and then a couple novels. And so for me, it was my first sort of real formal work with having a knowledgeable critique. And I certainly got a ton out of it, I mean, it is really helpful to have someone come to you and someone who's experienced and point out the weaknesses in your writing, the bad habits you have, and I had quite a number of them. And
absolutely.
And so, oh sure, thanks, absolutely.
No, I mean, it's absolutely a good idea to do that. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it's a great idea. So I got a lot out of it. Did you do yours straight out of college? College? I mean, it was like high school, and that's what you did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I went straight to school for that. Yep.
So
of course, I did the big workshops and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, and I imagine that was also useful, but I think it would actually be probably useful in a very different way.
Yeah. Was. Well, the biggest, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, and the biggest problem that people tend to have with that is that you spend a whole semester with a group of 20, 25 people, and you start writing to an audience.
Yes, exactly.
Because you know who's going to be reading it. So, if you're writing 3 or 4 stories during a semester, and people get, used to your writing, you'll be like, oh, these people like this, so I'll write it this way.
And it's all a lot of the nice thing about, a lot of the low residency programs is you get a much wider range of students. At how old was I when I started that? 36. I was actually on the younger end of the spectrum of students.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting too, because of course I would have been, everybody would have been
in the same
20, 25, yeah.
Same age cohort. Whereas this having people sort of really from 2 or sometimes even 3 different generations, you get a lot of other interesting perspectives during those workshops and exposed to a lot of different kinds of writing that you might not. So yeah, I think it can totally be worth it. Do some research and talk to the faculty and make sure they're receptive. So for me, and this is true at a lot of writing programs, like writing genre stuff, people aren't necessarily going to be as open to it depending on the program. So that would be, if you're going to be writing genre fiction, that would be something you definitely want to check in on to see how amenable they were to it.
Well, thanks for that, because that's a perspective even I hadn't heard before.
No problem.
And final question. So obviously you've written in tons of different mediums, books, comics, video games, role-playing games. What is your favorite, and would you go back to comic books?
So my favorite is absolutely the novel, because I can control everything. There's really no limits on what you can do in a novel that there are in other kinds of writing I've done. So for instance, video games are probably the most financially rewarding and the least creatively rewarding for me, just because there's so many other, even more so than a movie, there's so many other filters that your creativity has to go through, texture, budgets, and polygon counts, and processing power, and art asset, artist time, and programmer time, and all those things, and which are in, gameplay, making it fun. It's an interesting challenge, and it sounds like work, but let's be serious. It's not, it's not coal mining. It's, it's still a great job.
Right.
But, and then comic books sort of lie in the middle and I would totally do comics again. Cause it's a lot of, there's still all those strictures. You have to go through an artist and usually, a very specific page count, 22 pages. But at the same time, it's actually, I found that doing that fun, to work within those limits, gives you this fun structure to play with. And then in that, because it's much smaller, just you and the artist, that it's much more of a cooperative thing. And I always found every time I wrote a description of a panel, the artist would almost always do something even more interesting than what I, imagined in my head as I was describing it. And that process is a lot of fun. And generally has a much quicker turnaround than, a video game that takes 4 years to develop. So, yeah, comics I would totally do again.
Well, Rick, thanks a lot for being on the program. Your website is rickdakan.com.
Absolutely, yes.
And so everybody be sure and check that out. He's got a number of novels. Like I said, there's 3 in the Geek Mafia series. It's the one I read is fantastic. Like I said, I haven't read the other 2, but I will. And they're available, I think, paperback and ebook.
Yes, and through Amazon or through the publisher PM Press. And I have a horror novel called The Cult of Cthulhu coming out this fall at some point.
Oh, awesome.
So look for that, which is a little different than you probably think it is from the title. It's about people obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft, so it's not the traditional sort of Lovecraftian pastiche. It's more my commentary on belief and religion and those kinds of things. So, and that's coming out from Arcane Wisdom Press sometime this fall in a collector's edition, and then trade paperback next year. So.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. Well, thanks again for being on.
Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. And now back to the show.
Tonight's Obscure Character of the Week is brought to you by Demogoblin. The goblin who goes and tries out all the other goblins' plans before they go and do them. Demogoblin. Have you ever heard of the Ten-Eyed Man? First appearing in Batman number 226 in 1970, this guy has a really unique ability. He can see through his fingertips. He's blinded in an explosion he blames Batman for, and a scientist called Dr. Ingstrom reconnects his optic nerves to his fingertips so he can see. Sounds like it could be a pretty useful power. Anywhere he puts his fingers, he can see through them. He's also one of the easiest villains to beat ever. All Batman has to do is trick him into catching something, and he's totally useless, because whenever he touches something, his fingers/eyes hurt. In jail, his hands were locked in a box so he couldn't see, because Batman believed it would be too easy for him to escape, because obviously he has the most useful superpower in history. Marv Wolfman apparently had a list of obscure characters he wanted to get rid of during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the Ten-Eyed Man was on his hit list. He was one of the first to go. And he's so obscure that naturally he's popped up on Batman Brave and the Bold twice. And special thanks to the Dark Wasp for suggesting this week's Obscure Character of the Week. Hey, do you have an idea for Obscure Character of the Week? Maybe some fan art you want to show off, a question you want me to answer on the show, a comic you'd like me to review, anything like that. Well, send me a personal message over Geekvolution, and I'd love to hear from you. And if there's a specific comic you want to send me, or anything like that, you can send me a package to the Geekvolution P.O. Box. And now it's time to find out what's in the amazing, gigantic, sprawling vortex we call the Comic Book Vault. Today, in honor of crazy illegal schemes involving comic books, we're going to take a look at Bartman #1. Bart has to foil a scheme by the school bullies to steal comics from a warehouse before they've been foil stamped, which they then plan to sell to the comic book guy as rare error issues. It's pretty funny, by the way, that the giant vat of silver ink Bartman's hanging over on the cover is done in foil, and that Bartman has to foil a foil plot. Like a lot of Simpsons comics, there are several clever jabs at the comic book industry. I'm finding as I read more of these that the biggest appeal is finding all those references. There are several jokes poking fun of crossovers, and I think my favorite gag is a rack of comics ripping on the X-Men. Here they're the Z-Men, and the titles are Z-Team, Z-Babies, Z-School, the Animated Z-Men, Another Bunch of Z-Men, and the Unwieldy Z-Men. There's a smart yet lighthearted commentary on the state of the industry in the early 90s. This is right around the time of the big crash, when there was a lot of overprinting and variant covers were first getting popular, which flooded the market and devalued the books. Milhouse and Bart talk about how weird it is that a cover not having a foil stamp could be worth so many times more than one that did, and how what makes a comic worth money is simple economics, supply and demand. If there aren't very many of them and a lot of people are searching them out, they get expensive, so the comic book guy can sell an error book that's cover price $2.50 for $50. With Bartman himself, the book makes fun of comic book continuities and the obvious lack of realism that's sometimes found in superhero books. Bartman's real name is in his superhero name, and yet no one can figure out who he is. There's a newspaper headline at the end that says, "Who is Bartman?" Milhouse calls him with the Bartman signal, of course, and even he can't tell Bartman is Bart, and they spend all their time together. Some of the jokes in the dialogue are hit and miss, but all the stuff about the industry itself is vintage Simpsons satire. We've got a Bartman lot up this week, and lots of other Simpsons comics, several Simpsons lots, and lots of other stuff. So be sure to check out our eBay. Username is Captain Logan 1989. And now it's time to find out what the year was for this week's Batmobile. And this week's Batmobile was indeed from 2010. This is the Batmobile from Neil Adams' Batman Odyssey. Well, hey, that's all the time I have for you tonight. I'd like to thank my special guest, Rick Dakan, for being on the program. Be sure to check out his books and his website, and thank you very much for watching. If you're ever in the Kansas City area, would you check out Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas? That's our official sponsor and my favorite place to get comic books. If you're not, then make sure to support your own local comic book store. And I want to close out tonight by showing you a little bit of fan art from the Dreamer of Dreams on our website, wearegeeksnotnerds.com. He's an art student doing some really neat stuff, got some great drawings, and so enjoy that. And in the immortal words of the Tick, that wasn't really a magic hubcap. The magic was inside of you all along. I'm Captain Logan, signing off.